Hi, welcome to Off Camber with
Chris and
Corey. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the podcast this week, the Off Camber Karting podcast. Your favorite, your one and only. A little bit of marketing there, but hope everyone's been having a good week. We just got done with our Indy 500 special, and we're going to bring you some interesting stuff this week. Hopefully, a nice, new, fun, engaging topic since we're through the Indy 500. But first of all, we got to report on the news. And Chris, what do we got coming in for the news this week?
First of all, we'd like to express our support for and give our well wishes to Braden Eves. We know he had a pretty spectacular incident at Indianapolis in the Indy Pro 2000 race. So just thoughts and prayers with his family. Hope he makes a speedy recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really wicked wreck, and that's tough to see anytime. And hopefully we can get past that, and hopefully we can get a season back underway. I guess let's see here. Big news in the racing world that just came out today for us. The Williams family is officially leaving the F1 team after Sunday's Italian Grand Prix. It's going to be completely turned over to the Capital Group that bought them. Claire Williams and her father are both officially leaving the team, and it will only be Williams, really in name only now.
Yeah, it's if you think about it, they're the last family team in Formula One, which seems like a thing that would have died out decades ago. But it's sad to see that last holdover of a golden era kind of fading out. But it secures the future of the team. Hopefully they can still be involved in Formula One in some capacity. That both Claire and her father are iconic, outside of their roles in the team management. So hopefully we can see them, still being involved with the sport at large.
Yeah, it looks like that they've got some various members of the Capital Group coming in to the board of directors. I don't know if they're going to continue with Williams Technologies, where they have started their foray a few years ago into the EV technology. And at one point, I thought they were providing some of the parts for the Formula E championship. But I don't know. I don't know if that's continuing.
I can't remember.
But we wish them the best. It is really, really hard to see the Williams family not in the Williams team. Also, relating to Williams and kind of their history and their struggles through the years. If you have Netflix out there, there's a brilliant Williams documentary on Netflix that I encourage everyone to watch. I believe it's called Williams, and it's a really neat peek inside. And it really, I believe it took place. They filmed parts of it last year or the year before. I forget exactly, but really nice piece. And obviously, some insight into them would be the Formula One series on Netflix. They have an episode that really centers around them last year. So, best wishes to them, and it'll be nice to see how Williams moves forward and hopefully moves up the grid. And they've made progress this year, and I hope that progress continues. Here's a fun, I say fun piece of news, but here's a piece of news. Really want to give a shout out and a fun warm wishes to Lando Norris, specifically going into this weekend. Recently seen his video of him courageously fighting off the two wasp or hornets that came into his streaming room while he was streaming his Fall Guys content with the WTF1 guys.
Oh no.
They look like murder hornets.
Oh, Corey, why would you say that? For those of you who don't know, I fear but one animal on God's earth, and it is, well, collectively anything that flies and has a stinger. So, Luckily, y'all cannot see what my skin is doing right now, but it's ooh man, you just made me so twitchy, man. Why would you do that?
It was really funny watching the video. It was all they have a few videos up. I think he was playing with the guys from WTF1 just doing Fall Guys. And he tried to vacuum them up and they were so big they wouldn't get sucked up with a vacuum. Um, it was pretty funny. My wife was just cracking up. And a really cheeky thing that Racing Point did was they came out with a little poster for the Italian Grand Prix because we're going to have, I believe, Monza and is it Mugello?
Yeah,
Yeah, because we're
Mugello.
going to have like three in Italy. We have Mugello, and then we are going back to Imola,
Oh wow.
I believe. But yeah, they have like two in a row here. And they came out with this poster, and it's one of those fun little kind of like Where's Waldo kind of things, like all this stuff going on. And if you look up the grid, you see Lando Norris running away in his race suit and helmet from two Hornets.
Well, now that we've guaranteed I'm not going to sleep tonight, um,
Just so you know, people, this
um,
is also a horror film.
oh God, Corey. See, like I would be of the opinion, like, you know what? Make a flamethrower, and if you singe part of your ceiling while dealing with the intruders, you can paint over it. Now, if you're from the leasing office at my apartment, please forget you heard that.
It's like spiders in me. Like if I see a spider in this house, I will tear the walls down.
Trying to get
I
away.
will I will no, it's not that I'm trying to get away. I will eliminate them. I've had some big spider incidents in some of my previous homes, and I take no prisoners now at all.
Ooh, tell them about
I
the
don't
one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Let's just say I went into the laundry room one night, and our laundry room is the basement of our house that we lived in. And it it was really dark, and I went to grab our laundry basket. I had folded up laundry, put it in this basket the night before, and I hadn't put it away yet, so I went to grab the big basket. And I look in, and and on top of one of my wife's sweatshirts, I'm like, "Huh, honey, when did you get a spider print sweatshirt?" Never mind. At first, I thought it was one of her James Hinchcliffe shirts because she's a big James Hinchcliffe fan, and he was sponsored by the company Spider. And I thought, oh, it's the spider on that shirt. And no, 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 no. It was this big spider, probably about as big as my hand. And I knew that spider logo was white, not brown. So we went to war with it and ended up didn't really have any spider killer per se, but I'll tell you what, carburetor cleaner and chain lube work really well, plus a really big hammer. If you're
That's
an
a
animal rights
Carter's guide
activist,
to.
I'm sorry.
It's Carter's guide to vermin eradication.
And I think we had a lighter just in case we wanted to light it on fire with the carb cleaner. Um, and we slowed it down with the chain lube.
Yeah.
So, yeah, spiders. Chris doesn't like bees, hornets, wasps. I hate spiders. Snakes are right up there too. So anyway, yeah. So, let's see. Is there anything else in the news this week that's really crazy? Not really. We try to report really interesting things, not just the normal things. I guess gotta say congratulations to William Byron on his first Cup Series win.
Yeah. Former classmate of mine.
Yeah.
Willie B's the guy for me. So good job, Will.
He's the only other driver I think to win with a number 24 in NASCAR now, other than Jeff Gordon.
Yep.
So that's pretty crazy.
He's in good company.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really all we have in the world of interesting news of motorsports, other than reporting race results. And we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep it fun. So anyway, getting on to our topic this week. We're trying to go forward with really nice, biting, fun topics, something that's going to get everyone involved. And except for the Indy 500 special last week, this week we're going to start that trend, and we had previewed it a little bit last week. this week our topic is backmarkers and everything that goes into being on a backmarker team and being a driver within the sport, being a backmarker. And we have a special guest joining us this week. If he wants to queue up his mic now, we have hey, hello,
Welcome.
welcome to Off Camber Karting.
Oh wow, it's very special. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's
So
very
this
shiny
is
in here.
Andrew
Yeah.
McCaul. Andrew, tell us a little
Wow.
bit about yourself.
Well, I just graduated from Purdue University this past spring with a degree in mechanical engineering. I know both of you guys from karting when I was at Purdue, and in fact, I was Christian's crew chief for 3 years.
Yep.
If
Yeah,
you're getting the
those are
gist
some
of
crazy
this,
times.
if you're getting the gist of this, Christian was a backmarker at one point. We were all
Hey.
backmarkers. I am a backmarker.
I helped
Now.
fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did, and yeah, I gotta say, Andrew, I definitely the climb up the grid would not have been the same without you. So thank you for being an integral part of that and keeping us all sane.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, and I certainly wouldn't have done it with anyone else.
It was cool to see these two guys, working their way up the grid, and then it was also, hair pulling time a few times. So from the other side of the counter, I was like, oh boy. And then some days like, oh, this is good. So we thought we would bring you on here, Andrew, because you have the interesting technical insight. I talk about my behind the counter view. You have the other side of it, as you're a driver as well. But as Chris drove in Grand Prix, I've driven a lot. Chris has driven a lot, and you have driven a lot. But you did not drive in Grand Prix. You were specifically his crew chief, and it's not often we get to hear this from that perspective. We get to hear about the drivers griping about cars all day. That's the first person they interview normally is a driver, and they'll gripe about something. But I thought this would be a fresh take on things coming from the crew chief and how you need to approach that from the technical point of view and keeping a team together. So I guess we'll take it away with really starting out. Nobody wants to be a backmarker that I know of. I mean, Chris, do you know of anyone that really wants to be a backmarker?
I know of people who who are there and want to be there for the experience and not necessarily people the gentleman driver who's there to have fun, and wherever you finish. But I don't know anyone who's like, you know what, given a chance between being at the front or at the back, I'll take the back, unless it's like your first race and you don't want to get binned. So
Yeah, I guess maybe start and park like NASCAR.
yeah. But that's really more of a situation of financial requirement rather than aspiration,
And I guess we'll hit on the financial requirement aspect of backmarkers as well, because a major part of professional racing, obviously, the biggest part is money. It's a biggest part of any racing, but is money, and specifically with the professional side, you get so many teams that are out there trying to turn a profit somehow or trying to keep themselves afloat. And there are various ways of doing that. You can have a team that's winning everything and they could fold tomorrow financially. You could have a team that's running at the back and they could be self-sufficient, perfectly fine.
Yep.
Or, vice versa.
I guess to draw a NASCAR parallel, to all the viewers, I'm a huge NASCAR fan. So a lot of analogies I make are going to be NASCAR related. But yeah, as Corey said, you could have a team like Furniture Row that wins a title and then folds. Or you could have a team like Spire or Rick Ritter Racing who they don't necessarily run super well, but they make money off what they're doing. So I bet they're happy at least for that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess we can go kind of start out with our experiences. My experience with backmarker teams has been most of my career, to be honest. I I say that, and Chris is probably, I can feel the Superman, laser beams coming from his eyes. And he's
Okay,
in,
good. I want to make sure you caught wind
yeah,
of that.
yeah, and you're in North Carolina, I'm in Indiana, so that's really good laser beams. So
Yeah,
I
I worked on it.
yeah, I've won quite a bit, and that's thanks to a lot of hard work and a lot of people chipping in and helping me out. But my career has been really tough for the most part. My first race, I got lapped 5 times. Now, my second race, I came in second place. I learned from my mistakes.
Very quickly.
But yeah, there was a lot of in between time where really I was mid pack at best. It was just one of those struggles, and it was really a constant struggle. And then we had this big uptick in performance, and then we had this big downtick in performance more recently. And so now when I go to the track, I'm more of a backmarker, and I don't want to be there necessarily, but I'm more at peace with it now than I was when I was, 18 area, being older driver now in a younger man's sport. So that's my experience. I've had so much of that, and I've raced some big races where I've been right up at the front or right at the back. um, so, uh, Andrew and Chris, if you want to take it away on your experiences with that.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Yeah, back to the Grand Prix thing, or even when I started out in rental karting when I was, in middle school, at a local track, kind of a ride and drive. And there, they do like endurance races, and of course, being small and new to it, I know about the whole being 5 laps down at the end thing, right?
Yeah.
And they used to send me out, even just during the regular, hot lapping time. They'd send me out in a junior kart with all the senior drivers with the larger engines because they said the most important thing was learning how to be the slowest person on track before you learned how to fast.
That's a good point.
Because it is a lot harder to deal with being overtaken and being swamped than it is to deal with picking your way through traffic. Because at the end of the day, you have a better chance of determining how you're going to pass someone than how you're going to get past. Right. So that was my my earliest experience with it. But going into Grand Prix, right? Just from the logistical and financial side, I was racing with the smallest team out of what had previously been used as the men's restroom in the basement of my dorm. The room didn't even have like electric lighting. Like they had stripped the room. It was an 8x16 closet essentially. Um, but you when you go into it, well, first thing I'd like to say is that being a backmarker or being considered an amateur, amateur comes from the word for lover, right? So it's the doing it because you're not going to get anything financially or professionally out of it, just doing it because your passion won't allow you to not participate, right? That's the purest distillation of love for the sport. And I'd say this is true for me, for you, Corey, and for Andrew. I think that's what keeps us going in those moments of having been back markers, and that's what allowed me to push forward. It was slim chances that I would qualify, let alone be competitive in the race. But it kept me coming back and doing everything I could to get that little bit better and find small things.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and that's what so then 2 years in, or 3 years in, Andrew, then I meet Andrew, and now we've got something to build off of, and that. But that mentality of saying, you're not going to get discouraged just because you didn't run up front or lead laps. You're going to take what everything that you could get at a given day with your given performance. You're going to take the high points from it, and you're going to just keep trying to get better, even if it's not by leaps and bounds. And that's how we eventually got to being, running up in the top 10 in this huge race by the end.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess when I joined the Meredith Grand Prix team with you, Christian, I kind of didn't know what to expect exactly. I didn't know the status of Meredith or anybody, like who was the best team, whatever. All I knew is that I wanted to be in the race somehow.
Right.
And you opened the door for me my freshman year, and it was super exciting, regardless of where we finished. And in the end, I'm really glad I joined like a really tiny team in the beginning, because that allowed me to learn so much of my karting knowledge, just hands-on, kind of on the job. And I think that's honestly one of the hidden blessings of being on, say, like a backmarker or a really tiny team.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that from my experiences. Experiences in sports car crewing, just in racing in general. Being on a small team, being in a smaller shop, for instance, you really learn every job that you need to do that needs to be done within that team.
Yep.
And it can definitely help you. It can definitely work against you, especially when you get in a situation where you've learned those jobs and you have to teach it to somebody else sometimes. And it's tough to do that. But it definitely helps you in the long run, because you start to understand more about the car. You start to understand more about how things with the car work, how the organization's supposed to work. It really makes you a more complete racer. And I feel that most backmarker teams, the guys on those teams, since they have to do so much, since they have to put so much time into it, I feel they're more complete racers than, say, guys at really big teams that have one job, and that's it. They do nothing else. They have one job, and I think that really that comes to the forefront, especially when you get into a series that's more spec, where they limit the number of crew members or team members on the car, and you have to learn that. The guys who have been used to that really kind of start to rise to the top, out of just that sheer willpower, kind of going forward and knowing how to work on all this stuff and their passion for it. So yeah, and funny experience I had in my college race. How many guys did you have in your crew at Purdue?
Max was 7, but I think we got 5 my freshman year. I think something similar to that. Sophomore, and then like a full team my junior year, so Christian's senior year.
And how many?
We were always
how many of those were working on the kart regularly?
Oh, we were always had about like 4. I think at our max we had like 4 people who were like 4 or 5 people who were always there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of a rotating cast outside of me, Andrew, and Ryan. Depending on the year, they would be like that third or fourth, main member. But and then outside of that, it was kind of a rotating cast. But so at least, so we did have a core of people who could do just about anything, or direct the other folks to do the minor things while they focused on something big.
So my experience when I raced in Little 5 at St. Joe, I don't remember how many, like we had a maximum people. Well, technically I don't remember if we had a maximum number of people that could quote unquote go over the wall for the pit stops, but we had to, much like Purdue, we had to provide corner workers, and we had to provide, since everything, they would electronically score, but they also hand scored as backup. So we had to provide somebody in scoring. So our team consisted of closer to 10 people, I think, overall, because we had to provide one or like maybe it was 2 or 3 corner workers and then 1 scorer plus everyone working on the car and the driver. And it really was a little bit different for me because I had to get a lot of people to help out with corner workers and whatnot, and there was really only 2 of us who ever consistently were working on the car. Myself, because it was my equipment and I'd raced outside of Little 5, and then my chief mechanic, who was not my crew chief. My chief mechanic was, he'd worked on cars with his dad, and shout out to you, Jeremy, if you ever get to listen to this. He had worked on cars with his dad, worked in automotive stores. So that was his experience, but he had more experience than anyone else because this was a liberal arts school. No engineers. So it was him and I who were the ones working on the car, but our crew chief, she was really good at the organizational side of things. So I thought, well, when I need somebody to do that job, organize things, get people in places where they need to be, and actually run the team, that was her job. But it kind of felt, since that team was a little bit bigger, everyone kind of started to lose respect for what we had to do at one point, and we had kind of a, pardon the phrase, but the coming to Jesus moment. We had one of those meetings one night, and because literally, as a backmarker, I feel like you really have to, and I don't want to say more so than the bigger teams, but to a certain extent more so, I guess, you have to assess your deficiencies.
Yep.
Where you're slower, where you don't have as much money, things like that. And you really have to look at areas that you can shine. You're not going to have a full package, I don't think, as a backmarker team, but there's maybe 1 or 2 areas where you can really show what you're worth. And you really focus on that. And then you build that up, and then you can move on to the next. It's a little bit slower process than with a bigger team where you have somebody come in and say, okay, you have all this money, we can just improve all this and do, whatnot. And it's like, no, we don't really have the money. We don't really have the know-how necessarily. So let's focus on one thing. And it turned out we really wanted to focus on pit stops, for instance. And my crew members had one job. And that most of my crew members had one job, and that was their over-the-wall job. And they really lost that sense of accomplishment in their jobs because they thought, well, this is all I do. This is so simple. And we had that kind of coming to Jesus moment where our crew chief sat down, and my chief mechanic and myself, we all sat down and said, hey, we got to get this together because we are not going to win this race this way. It's going to be tough for us to win the race anyway, but we need to get together and do what we can with what we've got. And we need to be proud of that. So I think in a smaller team, yes, you definitely get that sense of everyone's working in unison. Everyone's got to know all these different jobs versus the big teams. And that makes you a more complete racer and everyone a more complete worker. I guess moving on to the next part of that would be, like I said, trying to improve, trying to maximize certain areas of performance versus trying to maximize the whole package. Like I said, we really wanted to maximize our pit stops. We had no idea going into it. I had witnessed Purdue, and I knew what Purdue's pit stops were like. They're next to nothing time-wise if you do it right. And I had never witnessed the pit stops at Little 5, and our pit stops were considerably different. So I thought, okay, we have a little bit more wiggle room here, but what can we do to maximize that and get us out of the pits as quickly as possible? I think we're going to gain a lot of track position there. And we really, I brought all my crew, like literally everyone on the crew, to my house in my shop one weekend. And they were like, oh, we don't want to be here. We don't want to do this. We got this party to go to. We got this to do. And I'm like, guys, one weekend. It's not even the Army Reserves. Just let's go work on this. And we improved our pit stops so much that in the race, we were recorded as the fastest modern era pit stop at that race. So, and it was funny because every other facet of it, except for I think driving, but every other facet of the race, we were garbage. I felt like we just didn't have, we were so slow on track. We had like maybe 15 minutes of practice time. We had some mechanical issues. Just didn't really have the money going into it. So there was so much. We didn't even have an easy up for the team because we were allowed to have that, and didn't even have a cooler full of cold drinks. Everyone had to bring their own thing. So just all these different areas, and actually the guy who won, a few of his crew members were regulars with him in his racing endeavors outside of school. So we were like, I had nobody in my team that had experience other than me racing outside of school. So we were really, really on the back foot. But by gosh, we did the best pit stops. And I remember the radio station at the college got so mad because they couldn't interview the driver during the pit stop because we were so fast.
Yeah, here's what I'll say to that. You're right about having to find and identifying the things that you can change and the strengths that you already have. And part of that is you it doesn't matter who's offering advice, you listen, right? Even if it turns out that the advice isn't great, you listen, right? Like you don't turn anyone away. When they say, "Oh, you can, maybe try this or that or the other," even if some of it's just not applicable,
Yeah.
you still listen because I mean, it's the epitome of leaving no stone unturned. You got to look at absolutely everything. And sometimes it's disheartening because you're looking at sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Like, oh, we should have had the bottom end of our motor rebuilt. Like, if you're new to it, you just don't know that. And God willing, the engine stays together long enough for you to learn that. But some of
Hopefully not
it's
the
like,
hard way.
yeah, yeah. But sometimes you're looking at it and you're looking at the things that other teams are changing and or switching out or replacing or modifying, and you're looking at what you have and you're like, okay, well, I'm not even close to that. And it can be disheartening, but then you look at other parts where perhaps you have a bit of organizational flexibility, or you have, some ways you can slide under the radar. Uh, so here's the example I've got. So when we were racing for Meredith, we had a chassis that was okay. So this must have been 2015, 2016, 2017. We had a chassis that was a 2011, 2012.
Yeah, that sounds
But
right.
yeah, but it was a CRG chassis, really good chassis, pretty stiff, pretty responsive.
It was a shifter
Um,
chassis. It had front brake mounts.
yep.
Oh, wow.
And so we had a head start with that, even if our everything else that we had was ancient. We still had that. So it's like, okay, well, we know we might not be able to get through, we won't have the power down the straights. We didn't know enough about tuning. Even if we had a good engine, we didn't know enough about tuning to extract that little extra out of it. But we knew that, at a place like Whiteland in the fall series, we knew that we could, those were corners that were made for that kind of kart. And we knew that we could, that
Yeah.
if we focused on setting that up right, we could sail through those corners. And lo and behold, we finished second. The only person that could outrun us was a guy who dominated that class of racing for
Guy
while
who
we were
drove an
there.
Indy Lights for a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, we were up in pretty rarefied air. And then once we got back to the main race at Purdue, we knew that track just didn't suit us, but we took the opportunities that we had and the few strengths we had and made sure we just emphasized those to be able to if we could emphasize those, maybe we could get a leg up, and that would give us some momentum or help us have enough results to find a sponsor or something that could then help us get that next step. So we weren't gonna move up 10 grid places in just after 2 or 3 races, but maybe we could find enough to have the building blocks that by the end of the season we would be prepared to get 2 or 3, we'd be faster than 2 or 3 other teams by the next season. So it was the small stuff, but you have to you have to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, because it's kind of like driving an underpowered vehicle. If you're driving let's say you're driving a Miata on a racetrack, every corner becomes critical. If you're driving a Mustang, the corners aren't that critical. You just fly down the straightaway. But with a Miata, you have to, every corner, every little bit of slip, every little bit of friction is critical, because it all adds up. Because you can't really do much. You don't have anything to offset that with, and that's what it's like running with a pretty lean budget, and with
Yeah.
with older equipment. It's like, okay, every little place, there are only a couple of places where you can gain and a lot of places where you can lose, and you gotta make sure that you're at least breaking even on it if you can.
So I guess adding more to my experience, my regular career in racing really was trying to build those building blocks, one at a time. And initially, when we actually entered into full racing, because my first year we did yard cart division, and they ran us all yard carts and rookies together, and we were relatively close. There were some kids running, full-on restricted racing carts with treaded tires, and I'm running this yard cart without a roll cage there's no governor on the engine, but it's running these big knobby tires and the gears welded to the axle. So that wasn't really a season to build on. That was just getting experience, track time, but not necessarily driving experience. It was just learning the ins and outs of how everything worked there at the track. But when we got our first racing cart, moving forward, we were dirt racing, and our first racing cart was actually an asphalt car. It wasn't even a dirt car, so it was what we call straight rail chassis. So it was designed to go left and right. Neither of them particularly well with this car, and it was from 1992. So it was very old compared to what I was racing against. This was probably 2002, 2003. And we definitely did not have a great engine package. The first engine we got was what came with the car, and it didn't have a builder sticker on it. And we blew that engine up. It was funny. My second race out in it, we blew it up. So we ended up going with a reputable builder, but it was a builder that did different stages of engine builds, and we went with the economy build. So it wasn't the flat out fastest, best equipment that we could get. It was what we could afford. And it was a good, for the price point, it was a good engine, but it wasn't a great engine. It definitely didn't have everything done to it that could be done to it. So we didn't have a good car, we didn't have a really good engine, and we definitely didn't have the right tires. We were running on years old tires that we bought off of our buddies who got into it. So we were really on the back foot, and I was racing with my grandfather, and we had no idea. There was no setting up this car, mind you, except moving the wheels in and out and air pressure. That was it. There was no adjustments on it. Well, there was one adjustment, and we really were told not to touch that adjustment because it would turn into an engineering nightmare. It was the front axle on the car was, instead of being welded, instead of the spindle yokes being welded to the chassis, it was on this single bar that went across, and it was split down the middle, and it had clamps, and it had control rods holding the outsides of the bar in place, and you could loosen all that up and move the bars independently of one another, and you could rotate it, tilt them back and forth, move them in and out. And it was a really neat concept back in the day, but it was described as the cart with a million wrong setups and one right setup.
Yeah.
So that was our car. And my grandfather and I, I'm 12, 13 years old. I am fresh into this. And our buddies who got us into this really didn't have much setup knowledge as well. They were a little bit farther ahead than us, but they had some people helping them, but they weren't helping us necessarily. So he told me that season, he's like, this is as good as it gets right now. Go out there and focus on your driving. That's the only thing that we can definitely improve on right now. Okay. And so I learned that first season, or first full season, I guess it was my second season, but my first full season running a racing kart, that driving was so important. And I think it was my first or second race out. I came in second with it, but the rest of the season was, barely cracking the top 5 if I was really, really lucky. And that was if we had 8 karts or something. But it was a real challenge the rest of the season. And it really gets you down, but that was the only thing we could focus on to improve at the time. We didn't have the money to put into it to, really make it a lot better. And then the next step we took after that was improving the chassis. So we got a new chassis, a purpose-built oval car that had very low time on it. It was only a year old when we got it. And that overnight improved the whole package. Like we had some growing pains the first time out on it, admittedly. We had some stuff to learn with it. And when I first went out, I'm like, it's no better than the other car. I want my other car back. And my grandpa's like, well, now we got to learn the setup side of it. We got to learn how to set this car up because this has a bunch of different changes on it you can make. And we didn't have that before. So we need to learn that in order to make this better. Okay? So we started learning a little bit of the setup side. We eventually got somebody to help us out with that. But we still weren't quite there with setup, but we were definitely improving. And we found that, we had a horsepower deficiency. So eventually we saved up and found a really good engine builder for a really competitive price and got really good engines on the car, like probably some of the best engines I'd ever had. We were running Briggs flatheads at the time. And this guy was really he was retired, and this was what he was doing as a hobby, but he was a very reputable builder. And man, our overnight, everything started improving, and he knew so much about setting the cars up and working with the engine. So we called him one day. He's like, if you ever have questions, just shoot me an email. I'm on my computer all the time. Shoot me an email and we'll talk. And if you have setup questions, I'll help you. And that was where we started to take off. We had the good engine at that point. I had the driving knowledge. So we had 2 components. Didn't necessarily have the money to put everything else together yet, but we had 2 components, and we started to move up the grid and challenge a lot more. And then we started to get better with the setup side of things. And probably by the time I left my dirt racing career, we had all but one component needed to, have a full package. And it took years. I was in dirt racing for, 10 years. And it took all of that 10 years, 10, 11 years or whatever, to get all that package together with the budget that we had and with how small we were and with the lack of knowledge that we had, I guess. And I guess by the end of it, the only thing we didn't have together was our tire program, because the tire program evolved drastically from when we started, and we really didn't have that tire program. And I remember somebody talking to my grandpa at state championship one year, and he had two kids racing. They had the whole package basically, and they had been state champions. They had run in national championship races. They were very good, and actually his son went to NASCAR, not to drive, but as a crew chief. So he came over one day, or I guess it was at state race, and he looked, and he's like, if you ever get some good tires or decent tires on that car, he's going to be freaking unstoppable. And it's like, yeah, we don't really have the money to have the tire program. And he's like, well, that's the one thing you're lacking on that whole setup. And when I did have some good tires to put on there, it was a pretty good day. But yeah, just building up, trying to find your strengths over time, things that you can change, that you can do better than anyone else, and having to do that probably at a slower pace than the bigger teams or teams with unlimited budgets, is definitely something that you have to deal with as a backmarker. And to that extent, the budget issues. Chris and Andrew, I'm sure you guys had, enough budget issues
Oh boy.
More than
It,
our fair share, for sure.
yeah.
Um, I remember one of the other Residence Hall Grand Prix directors. He literally told me, "You guys are the most criminally underfunded team in the race." Yeah, we somehow and that kind of goes back to both of you guys' point of just accentuating the things you do have. Well, with Meredith, what I did know that we had was we had a driver who could be consistent and know how to manage a race, pick his places to pass, what have you, and that we were in control of how reliable the cart was, as much as our budget allowed us. So that was what we focused on, just managing the race and getting enough pace to at least qualify on time, and then just turning it into a tank. Because Grand Prix is a race of attrition in the end.
Oh yeah, in the worst kind of way.
Yeah,
I think we used to say that if you could make it into the race, it didn't matter where you qualified to make it into the race. If you made it into the race, and if you could finish all the laps, was it 160 laps?
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, if you could finish all 160 laps and do that without incident, you'd be in the top 10.
Yep. And you know, back to what Andrew, first of all, Andrew, thank you. I felt woefully inconsistent, but I feel better now that at least you can claim that I was consistent. But
No, you definitely were.
you know, aside from the times that I decided to go on a drifting expo mid race, but
I would best
yeah,
describe Chris's driving style, folks, as very much like Juan Pablo Montoya, but he hits a lot less.
yeah. I have to repair my own vehicle, so
Yeah.
yeah,
He tends
kind of
not to run into as much stuff as Juan Pablo Montoya, but he can lay down some screamers. So, yeah.
But yeah, so the first of all, we had my first year, our budget was $1,000. For perspective, the top team was pushing easily 20 grand. Easily. Oh, yeah, easily. With all the sponsorships, because we were only sponsored, truly sponsored in name and function 1 year. I mean, it was very very tasty restaurant sponsorship, so I'm not
They bought us
complaining.
tires. They were very nice.
Yes, they bought us tires, and we got a whole bunch of pizza. So
I stayed up till 4 in the morning making that sticker for your car, by the way.
yeah.
4 in the morning, and the race
Corey
was
is the vinyl man. Yes.
He's
But
like, I had a vinyl cutter. I'm like, I could do any sticker you want, and I'll do it for free as long as you buy the vinyl for it. He's like, okay, and he brings me the vinyl, and he brings me the logo of the restaurant to put on their car, and finally got it to me the night before the Grand Prix, and we got out. I got off work. I'd like to say that was like 11 o'clock that night when we got out of there, because night before everyone's
tire
breaking
night.
stuff. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tire night, and it was easily 11 o'clock, maybe midnight. And he brings me this. He sends me the file on the computer, and I look at it. I'm like, oh my god,
Is that a
why?
pickle?
Like, there to tell you, there was like what 7 or 8 colors on this one logo.
It was
easily.
rather complex. Yes.
It was a very complex hand-drawn logo, I think.
We apologize.
And I was up till like 4:30, and I'm trying to think when I had to be at the track. It was early.
It was like 7:38.
Yeah, 7 something like that, because I had to ride in with my boss, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I got to like 4:30. I'm like, I really want to make a second one. No, one is it, because I had to hand layer everything. I didn't have the transfer tape to do it all.
It's
So I'm like,
okay though. It's okay because we only had the one side panel to put it on.
yeah.
I remember for tech inspection for the 5-second egress, we actually had to cut off one of the tubes on the roll cage, so Christian had enough space to actually get out of the cart in 5 seconds.
Hey, I'm a thick boy, okay?
What was funny is I had to repaint that side panel too, because he brought it to me and there was like barely paint hanging on, and the paint that Chris brought, he accidentally grabbed chalkboard paint.
Oh shit!
And I'm like,
I did, didn't I?
yeah. So I had to go in the back room and find I'm like, what paint? I'm like, okay, I've got some black paint. There's not much left. And I'm like, okay, I got to get this painted in like 2 hours and dried and ready to put a sticker on it and then set it aside for Chris to come get. Holy crap. Or no, I think I took it to the track in the morning.
Yeah, I think I got it from you at the track.
Yeah, I delivered it to you. So that's why I had to be there so early because you had to have it on for tech.
Yeah. Man, so that's one of the things I love. That's another thing I love about being in a backmarker team because it's a community thing.
Yes.
That between you, Corey, and our family at the shop, because I say that we didn't have that we only had official sponsorship once, but we got lucky in that one of the strengths we did have was that we were able to develop a personal relationship with people, instead of just being able to just buy our way into things. We really you really get to know people, you know.
Yeah.
Just because not trying to get stuff out of people, but just because that's an aspect of the sport that even if you're not competitive, you can still enjoy it. You can still at least enjoy, the camaraderie of it. And so that it meant all that much more to have, a fruitful experience on that side. And that helps get us through the bad days, when you really are down on your luck. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that, so yeah, we didn't have a $500 wrap. We had however much I could spare from my bank account for vinyl and how much I could pick up after class. But it's stuff like that. There's some times where just to feel good and just to be like, it's a point of pride that even if our cart is old, we're still gonna try to make it look like we care. We're still going to try to pull it all together. And it's those little things that you find rewarding. Just knowing that, what, at the end of the day, people know that we're putting our best possible foot forward.
So can I tell you my total running budget? What my biggest year budget was when I was dirt racing?
Sure.
So we went back through in one summer, and this wasn't necessarily that we spent on a bunch of big ticket items. There was a lot of replacement items because in dirt racing, there's a lot of it is a contact sport somewhat, much like NASCAR at a super speedway or a short track or anywhere.
Yeah.
Bodywork 4, right?
Yeah, so we went through, I think, one season because we ran fiberglass and plastic bodywork on the cars, and we had to have it. One season we went through like 5 bodies.
Oh, good
Because
Lord.
what is deformation, right?
what is elastic deformation? Never heard of it.
Well, like fiberglass is repairable, but we didn't know how to repair fiberglass at the time. Nobody had taught me to do that. But
Oh,
it was
it's a
it, it's a pain, but it's doable, and you can make a body last a long time. And since then, I've learned how to repair fiberglass pretty darn well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
composites is an art.
yeah, like my Enduro cart, the nose on it when I first got it had a big sticker for Road America on the front of it with duct tape behind it. I'm like, uh-oh, there's something behind there. And I pull the sticker off, and there's this huge hole in the nose from like a weight
Surprise.
that came through. And I'm like, oh, okay, where they hit somebody's bumper. So I had to patch that up before we went to Daytona. And now, since I've gotten it all repainted, you can't even tell except for when you look at the inside that it's been patched. Yeah, we didn't know how to do all the fiberglass work. And besides, fiberglass bodies seem to be like twice as much money as the plastic bodies were. And at the time, there were no in dirt racing. At the time, it wasn't until probably late in my dirt racing career they came out with the rubberized plastic bodies, similar to what you see on asphalt cars, the CIK bodywork. They started using material similar to that in the bodies that can just take a beating and take a heat gun to it and pop it back out. But yeah, at the time we decided to run the plastic bodies because they're about half the price of the fiberglass. Problem is there is no repairing a plastic body that's, ABS hard plastic. Have to have a lot of super glue. But yeah, we went through like 5 bodies one season, and the budget number, I remember looking at it, my grandfather was just so bent out of shape because we funded this with our small business. And I think I had one real sponsor through the years who would donate $200 to $300 at the beginning of the season. That was it. And this was during my dirt racing career. But yeah, our budget number for 1 year was, I think we said $8,000.
Oh, y'all. Man.
And I know there were teams that were spending almost $8,000 a weekend.
Andrew,
Throw away
what
the
did
old
we?
chassis, new chassis every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Time to go dumpster diving. Ain't no shame in my game.
I have done that, and it
Can
is.
you even call that dumpster diving if you just like buy off a chassis that some top team threw away after one race?
Did you use the term buy?
I got a bunch of body work out of a dumpster once.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be a good venture, and it turned out to be profitable because some people bought the body work off of me later. I was like, woo, entry fees.
Yeah. There's your tire bill.
I know a guy who I've raced against regularly who bought I don't even know if it was a seasonal chassis off of a factory racer, but this guy had chassis for sale, so he went and he had just a small, like either a large shed or a small pole barn just full of them, all up against the walls. And he said, okay, take your pick. These are all last season's. I was like, what? And then he put it on a chassis table for him, made sure it was straight. And I think it was like a 1 or 2 race old car. And he got it for like a little less than half of brand new. Because it was one of those, he ran for a factory team, the factory gave him the cars, but they didn't want the cars back. Because they were trying to sell new cars. They didn't want to deal with the used stuff. So they said, whatever you want to do with them, you can do with them. So yeah. That was pretty crazy.
Andrew, how much money did we have our last year? So when we were like, I think the most we ever had was like a little over $2,000, like functional. I know that there was some drama that we're not going to get into, but I think functionally we might have passed $2,000 to run what, 5 or 6 race season.
Yeah, that's about right. We definitely made the most of what we did have. I don't remember our budget from our last year exactly, but I know we got a new chassis, and we just kind of retrofitted a bunch of the stuff that the team already had onto the new chassis.
Right. And that's the other thing, like you have to really do your homework. When you're about to buy something, you really, really, really have to weigh your options. You know, sometimes you're like, it's newer than what I have, I'll take it. But,
Yeah, it's like right now. So to the viewers out there, if there's anyone listening that actually races against me or has raced against me, and I have beaten you. I know that's a dick thing to say, but I'm sorry.
Wow, Corey. Wow.
But I will tell you that I did not beat you on dollars and cents. Like, I drove my butt off to beat you. I will just say that right now. Like, I drove my butt off because you really pushed me. Because my chassis, I got into asphalt racing. I traded an asphalt car with an engine a dirt car with an engine on it that was a good car and a really good engine. I traded a full package basically to a guy for my chassis right now. So I got into it relatively cheaply, whatever you could say we invested in that dirt car, but that class was going away in the dirt for that engine. And so I didn't really have a use for it. And this guy was all about turning that engine into like an open engine. I was like, okay. And I was looking at cars, and he ended up trading me this asphalt car. So my car is a 2008 Margay Brava.
Limo.
A limo, yeah. So it's the long front porch.
Doesn't look that old though.
No, so yeah, we talk about maintaining what we have. I was told, okay, when we were looking at asphalt, I was told, okay, you got to save up for a long time. We got to save up to get a car. So find the car that is going to do what you want for a long time. So don't buy the newest, hottest card out there. Buy what's going to do what you need it to do. So naturally, being a bigger guy and knowing that I had to run for a long time, I looked at stiffer chassis, long-term ball game versus something that was going to be really fast out of the box. And Margay at the time was probably the best package or chassis for me. And I'd looked at prices of new Margays and I was, oh man, they're expensive for me anyway. I know for some people that's chassis price is not an option or not an object. It's just, they just do it. But it was a big deal for me. And I traded for this car and it was exactly what I needed. I looked at it because this guy said he had an old Margay and he brought it to the dirt track the weekend after we talked about it. And he pulls in and it's got, the bodywork with the sticker kit on it and everything, the full factory sticker kit. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I want.
Take
what
my money.
And I was like, here, take the whole car. My grandpa was a little bit on the fence about it because he's, running our team and he goes to look at it and he's like, so you took it, right? And I'm like, I was waiting for you. He's like, you take it now. You do it now. You do that trade. I don't care. I don't want to see that card or that engine ever again. That's a nice setup. I'm like, okay. And it came everything but the engine. I threw in a bunch of old tires, and that's what I've been running since I got out of dirt racing around 2010, 2011. And it's been a very good car. I think I would argue it's finally starting to show some of its age, but it doesn't look like it's an old car. I've had it repowder coated, and I have a cleaning regimen with that car that I'm pretty sure I learned from Roger Penske. Like the axle comes out, everything gets deep cleaned. I have toothbrushes to clean it with.
He disassembles this thing like it's a thing of beauty. It's a thing of beauty. Like it's just everything just comes apart and goes back together.
I remember rolling up at a big race, street race we went to, and I got it powder coated candy blue. And in the karting world, most people identify a chassis by what color it is because there's so much alike. So I roll up on the grid, and Margays were normally black, silver, and now they're candy red if you get just a stock Margay for like a 2-stroke class. And rolled up on the grid, and somebody said, oh, hey, is that a new Top Kart? I'm like, no. And then somebody's like, no. It's a new Arrow, you idiot. And I'm like, no, it's not a new Arrow. And they're all looking like, what is it, some kind of prototype? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
They were convinced it was a brand new car because I'd only had like 1 or 2 races since I got it powder coated. But they were convinced it was a brand new car, and it's a 2008 Margay lining up on the grid against people who do have brand new cars. I was like, yeah, it's a new prototype car.
That is why I try to find like other unique identifiers for chassis, like the type of steering mount they have and the type of spindles they use.
The spindles are the dead giveaway for the Margay, so I was like,
Yeah.
come on, guys. They have this really weird, really cool spindle design. And if you know what a Margay spindle is, if you look it up, that's every Margay spindle for the past decade or two. So
This Margay trademark.
Yep. And these guys didn't know that, and I felt kind of bad. I'm like, how long do I let them play this game? How long do I play this game with them? I'll just let them.
Till you beat them.
Yeah.
Then you tell them.
Yeah.
I'm petty. I'm sorry. Look, so just for all the listeners, we are Margay fanboys. Proud Margay fanboys. So.
Although I wouldn't mind a new willpower cart. Those things are sweet.
Yeah, that is true. That I wouldn't just mind a new cart, period.
A new cart would be nice, yeah.
Same.
I've never had any. Okay, I lie. I had one new cart that I won in a raffle. I did win a new cart once.
It was a dirt cart?
It was a dirt cart, and it was a really cool cart, and it was a cart I really wanted. But remember how I said I didn't have the tire program together?
Yep.
that kart was one that was solely reliant on the tire program.
Ew.
Like, it had so many adjustments, but the setup manual says don't touch anything, work on your tires. And I'm like, oh. So the one night that we had a tire program, it was like driving a freaking Cadillac down the interstate that's been freshly paved. It's just smooth. It goes where you want it to go. There's no problem.
Do they even have those in Indiana?
Smooth interstates? No. We're constantly under construction.
Good old 65.
But yeah, it was like driving a new car down the interstate, just nice and smooth. But when you didn't get it right, it was such a handful. It was just like, oh my gosh, this thing hates me, no matter what I did. So,
the words of Darrell Waltrip, it's evil.
Yeah, it was evil. Yeah. But yeah, I was really grateful for that car, but man, it was a pain to set up. So yeah, that was I would love to just have a new car because I've not had one since then. And yeah, so if there are any chassis manufacturers out there or shops that ever listen to this, get a hold of me. You can email us and we can work out a deal. I would love to drive your equipment.
Yeah, here's your new factory driver, folks.
Yeah, I will be your representative in Yamaha Masters because I'm the older, bigger guy, and I know you like to. All these teams are focusing on the younger drivers now, building this talent for the future. I'm like, what about us old guys?
See, I'm in that weird, and Andrew, you're here too. Welcome to the party. But we're in this weird. We're out of the senior class, right? Because they say seniors 15 plus. I'm like, no, that's like 15 to 17, maybe 18. If you're between the ages of 18 and 30, you're kind of in no man's land, sprint karting wise.
Yeah.
So that's why I run vintage.
Yeah, Whiteland, they have a
older than me.
Masters class, and it's 30 and up. They dropped the age to get people to run in it because a lot less older people were running. But this year, they've had like 2 of us show up ever. So they said, we're not going to run it. We're just going to run you with senior. And I'm like, oh, crap. Because the kid who is really good in senior is like 15, 16, and he maybe weighs 100 pounds soaking wet. And it's like,
IndyCar aspirations.
IndyCar aspirations. His dad really has a great program together for him. Like, he's got new cars, new everything. He's a great driver. I mean, he's just got a full package, and he lets us know on the track about that because I think he finished like a second ahead of the pack. And when I say a second ahead of the pack, that's second place on back. So yeah. When you have to race against that, and Masters on average are like 1 to 2 seconds off of the senior guys normally, it's like, oh, come on.
And I'll be honest with you, when I was running the money race at Whiteland and Yamaha Can, right? And granted, I was running like a 2000 PCR.
A 1999, I think it was.
Oh,
or 2000, yeah.
It was beautiful.
PCR Jaguar.
Absolutely beautiful. But
that car drove
that thing
really
was a
well.
handful. I could see you just going at the wheel.
When the track was warm, it handled better than anything else, any other sprint kart I've ever driven. As soon as the track cooled down, thing was evil. But
to be fair, it was the track, I feel like, because my car did not handle well that weekend, and they just resealed the track, and it was like late September, early October, so it was really cold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Track's great now, but like at the time it was the perfect storm. But I had one of these. I was used to Grand Prix. We've got the big roll cage. The only body that's going to get hit if you make contact is your own because you don't have any body work. And I know about that. But and so there's a bit of give and take in that. And I went into turn 2 at Whiteland. Into the sweeper onto the backstretch. And this kid who could not have been more than 15 years old just sent it up the inside. And usually you can hear, if someone's right on your bumper, right, you can hear a double engine note, right? It's just like you can tell like, okay, there's another engine there. It sounds like an engine and a half, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even hear that, which means he came from a long way back and just put it up the inside at the apex and was like, "I'm here. What you gonna do about it?" I was like, I think I just aged 10 years. Okay, and
You got
just
Ferrucci'd.
oh, I got Ferrucci real hard, man. I was like, you know what? I think I just felt a gray hair. I'm gonna go park this thing and sit down and rethink my life.
As soon as you pull in, you get the mail delivers. Like, oh look, I got my first AARP letter.
Yeah.
I swear, when the masters pull off the class or pull off the track, they roll up. They walk out with walkers for us.
Yeah.
Now,
Hey,
given I am 31 years old, but that is old compared to some of these kids. They look at me like, "You're ancient," and I'm like, "You weren't even around when I started racing, but you're so much faster."
yeah. Andrew and I have a friend who we went to GoPro and we're signing in with our birth dates and everything, right? And he said 2000, and I about choked.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, love him to death. I was like, oh my god, oh my god. I was
You're
in
old,
school
Kristen. Oh my God.
and I can hear Corey's teeth just grinding into a fine powder.
Yeah.
Funner fact: that same friend and I share a birthday.
Yeah, that's what was weird about it.
Okay,
Except his is
a little more
exactly
off
2
topic
years
here,
later.
but to tell everyone how old we are, starting with you, Andrew, what was your very first video game system?
Oh, my very first video game.
Just the system.
I think it was like my home computer. It was a Windows 95. We had
Okay.
it was my family had an ancient computer that I got like a Hot Wheels 8-bit game. I
Okay.
think that's the first like game I ever got as a kid.
Chris, what was your first video game system?
So my family was. My mom likes computers, so we had a Windows 98 when it came out. But the first one that really got me into gaming was I got a Game Boy Advance.
Okay. All right. Now, some people who are older are going to listen to this. Corey, shut up. But hold on to your
Corey,
butts.
shut up. Sorry.
My very first gaming system. The first one I ever played was an NES.
Isn't it past your bedtime, old man?
But when I moved in, when I was living with my grandparents, like just a couple years later, we had gotten rid of the NES, and I played on Atari 2600.
I wonder what kind of dig sites you can find those in now.
I still have it. It's in my closet sitting next to me over here. But yeah, you're like Windows 95 computer. Our first computer was Windows 95, and we got it literally right before Y2K. You know, the whole Y2K bug thing.
Oh, so before the end of the world?
Yeah,
Lucky
before the end of the
lived
world.
through that.
I think we got it in like 98 or 99. And it was a Windows 95, so we didn't even have the new updated one. We got it because it was cheap.
Did it have the Netscape web browser?
No, it didn't even have Netscape. We still had the stupid, I think it was Internet Explorer back then. Or no, it didn't even have a full web browser. We had to install one. Yeah, and it was bad. Now the speakers that came with it, I wish I still had those. Those were really good speakers, but yeah. Quick time to watch stuff.
Oh Lord, QuickTime, man.
Yeah, my first computer I ever worked on was an Apple II. The silence is deafening.
Oh, good Lord! I think I just heard some more wrinkles pop in.
Oh, heck with you. Okay, let's get back on subject now. So backmarkers, we're talking about not having new cars and having to work and make what you have last. So as we have demonstrated, we've had to do that for quite a while. And once again, if you're a kart manufacturer or a shop that has some chassis that you would like to promote, you know how to get a hold of us. It is offcambermotorsports@gmail.com. So
just gonna leave that there.
Yeah, just gonna leave that there. Yeah, moving forward, making what you have last, and that can, to a certain extent, that can apply to engines. But as we know, engines, they got to run. You got to have an engine to run, so there's not much you can do unless you limit track time, and then that limits seat time, and that limits driving ability. And I know we had to go through that. I had to go through that very early on because, first of all, the dirt track, you get like 10 minutes of practice, and then it's race time, or maybe 5 minutes, because normally they had one practice session, 10 minutes if you have two. But you have like 5 minutes of practice, and it's race time. So we got really good at trying to perfect our setup with the minimum amount of track time. So when I came over to asphalt, and you can literally show up to the track during the week and run, or you can show up to the track early and run early race day, or you have like 2 to 3 practice sessions, and they're like 10 minutes to 15 minutes a piece. It's like, oh my gosh. So I know it drove some people, my former boss, it drives him nuts to this day that I'm not out on track every minute of practice. But that's just, I learned how to learned how to figure out what I could with the car in such a short amount of time, partially because that's all we were given, and partially because that's all I had money to do. I didn't have time. And money to go out and, just go to the track and practice. And with dirt tracks, most of the time, that's not an option, because unlike asphalt, where the asphalt's there and you're practicing for that race, and the conditions, unless the weather changes, the conditions of the track are pretty much the same. Dirt, there's so much more work that goes into the track to get it ready for a race. So, but yeah, to this day, my former boss, John, I'm sorry, really hates the fact that I'm not out there for every minute of practice. So that's why I can tell. That was one thing I had to develop from running as a backmarker. Like, I can tell really quickly what the car is going to do and what I need to do, and I have a plan of attack for that. And also, it saves me money.
Yeah, I mean that goes back into knowing strengths and weaknesses. You gotta assess that almost instant.
Yeah, you really. That's one area, the engineering, the work on the car. You have to excel at that versus being able to buy lots of new bolt-on stuff.
Right, and
yeah, you can't necessarily have all the track time because it's expensive also sometimes. But go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I was just thinking, and Andrew, if you want to chime in on this, we saw a lot of teams, they'd swap out axles, they'd swap out, they'd Swiss cheese their seats, getting everything perfect, and well, I would love to do that, getting my setup perfect. Seats are not cheap.
Yeah.
So we knew that, okay, that's a setup change that we're really gonna have to nail down. That's exactly what we need before we do it. As we can't change, we couldn't change tire compounds or have a special set of qualifying tires. It's usually we'd qualify on the tires we practiced on, depending on what state they were in. And what the tire fall off was like for whatever model we were running that year. Because I think I think the last year that I ran, we had a new set of tires for the race.
Yes, this is right.
Right, and we still qualified up the top 10. So
yeah.
but yeah, so that there's even adjustments that aren't really accessible to you just because of either manpower, time, or funding. You can't go and just swap things out and try different things just for the sake of seeing if they're better. And even though they might well be, I know in terms of test days, some teams we'd see on Instagram or Snapchat during breaks from school, people would be out in Florida testing or out whatever track in their home state testing. And I think non-race, just pure test days, non-race days, we might have done 3 or 4 of those the entire time I was racing at Purdue.
Yeah.
And
I think I was only there for one of them.
yeah.
Or
So
1 or 2.
Yeah, I think it was the last year we did one for sure test day. The year
It wasn't
before,
even that useful because the tires were just going away, so you ran slower.
and so you learned what you don't want the cart to do, which can be useful because at the end of a 160 lap race, that car doesn't drive anything like it did when it was new. Um, and there is something to learn about. There's something to be gained from learning how to drive a broken cart. You know, you just like I learned driving in a warehouse on sealed concrete, right, with no grip, right, and then went transitioned to racing lightweight carts outdoors with it felt like I was driving in the middle of a runway, right, and so it kind of makes that once you're in good equipment, there's some things you have to unlearn, but there's some things that there's a level of car control that you have that some of your peers might not have. But yeah, so
Yeah, and you know how to manage situations that maybe teams in more naturally advantageous positions, maybe they don't really encounter. So you have more experience dealing with, adverse situations. And when you're in an endurance race, that's going to happen eventually.
you get to know your cart really well because it doesn't always work. You know,
Yeah.
you get to know, whoa, okay, what's most likely to break and how do we fix it quickly? Like doing a 5-minute coil change in the grass next to the track.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely, man, brings back so many memories
Yeah.
of all the silly things like on in the dirt racing, every team has their own set of scales, electronic scales, to get all the corner weights and the cross weights on the car and nose weight. And when you don't have that, or you don't have access to that every weekend, you're at such a huge handicap versus those teams. And I remember when we got a scale stand at a swap meet for like $20, and our first scales were digital bathroom scales that we bought at like Walmart. And we set them up, and I had like cart calc or something. And yeah, I got it all set up on there and had cart calc to calculate everything. And I was like, oh man, this is so far ahead of where we were. But then when we finally did get scales, like real scales and laser alignment for the car and everything, was like, and caster camber gauges, it was like, oh my gosh.
It's like there are those moments where like, oh, this is what a go kart's supposed to feel like. Ah, now I
You're
get
missing
it.
out on, like, what?
Yeah, it was like, whoa, okay. I didn't know that I had this capability before. It is truly incredible, and it expands the notebook. Like we would have tire pressures, you know, track conditions, just basic stuff to write down on our setup pages because we'd print out setup pages, put them in a notebook. And now all of a sudden I had to print out all new setup pages to do corner weights, nose weight, cross weight, all that. Caster settings, camber settings, toe in, toe out, all of that. It was just insane. And then when we started doing two-stroke on dirt, when we were doing both Yamaha and the open class, then we started adding in pipes, flex length, all that stuff.
Oh god, you said flex length, and I think I shuddered a little bit.
I kid you not, my final year running, or I think it was my final year running an open class. That was my final year on the dirt. We ran an open class. We were running a completely modified Yamaha, and full open. And we started with a stocker pipe, the pipe that we'd used the year before, and that was what was suggested. And I had like 5 pipes, at least 5 pipes. I'm digging stuff out of the old bins at work, and I came across one from a swap meet, and I literally didn't have the money to put it on the dyno to try these things. So I'm looking on the micron gauge at the RPM graphs. I did have the data key, so I downloaded it onto our computer at home, and I'm looking at the RPM graphs for the different pipes for the different weekends. And I was lucky enough that I had like 2 to 3 weekends where the weather was the exact same and the track was almost the exact same. Wasn't a particularly great track, but the track was the same. So I was able to get a semi-accurate feel for the pipe and what one was going to work best. And I'm looking at the RPM graphs like, okay, this one's got this much drop off down to the low end, but this one's got this pretty consistent, doesn't really do these peaks and valleys real big. It's got this little wavy line down the middle. Like, that's interesting. So yeah, it's when you get into that, it just starts to add on, and as a backmarker, that just really, really, that's a lot, especially when you don't have the budget. Getting into it as a driver, it's tough because we talked about this. Realizing that when you don't have the best equipment, you have to come to terms with the fact that you're probably not going to finish that well if everything plays out as normal, unless there's some major shakeups at the front or mid-pack. You kind of have to come to terms with that, and you have to be hungry, but you have to be happy with what you have. You can't want too much. As a crew member, it's very similar, I feel. As a team owner, or as the head of a team, that Andrew, I can only imagine from your point of view as being the crew chief, looking at that like, okay, we have to look at this from every angle, including the financial, and what is going to be feasible for us going forward, and where's that going to put us competitively.
Yeah, I guess I totally agree with that. When you're in a position where you don't have the money to necessarily compete at the top, you do have to measure your expectations of where you think you want or can finish in a given race. And oddly enough, the approach that I like to take, especially when I'm in that situation, is I don't aim for a result. What I aim for is for us to do the things that we need to do to get better every race.
Exactly. That is, if there was something out of the whole list that I think I was looking for, that I thought that maybe this is something that a lot of backmarker teams have in common, is you don't look for the result necessarily. You're looking at executing your plan. I guess That's how I put it. Like, if you can execute your plan, whether or not the results come, you have done everything within your power. And that becomes the rewarding factor, I think, at that point. Going to the track now, being at the back of the senior class with all the younger guys, I pretty much look at it and like, okay, here's my lap times, here's the fast lap times. I have a plan I want to execute. If I can execute that plan, if I can do everything within my power, my time should improve. I'm probably not going to be able to touch those guys mid-pack or at the front, but I've done everything that I can do. And that's rewarding for me. And that's what I get out of it. And I think a lot of backmarker teams probably, we agree on that. I'm sure that is a big basis for a lot of backmarker teams. Like, if everything can just play out like you would like it to, if you can follow that plan, that's kind of a win in your book.
Mm-hmm. And you take care of your equipment.
Exactly. Yeah. Unlike a lot of the front running teams, we have to learn to live to fight another day. When you can't just replace stuff, you have to be a lot more conservative with your driving, with your tuning. And yeah, that you're thinking, as somebody who maybe runs up front, you're looking at a backmarker team thinking, well, I'd tune that to get the most speed out of it I can. Yeah, but one result may or may not turn your season around, but a season's worth of data, I guess, that you've gathered, and a season's worth of learning will build on it for further seasons, I guess, and being able to keep it going financially versus just having one race that was amazing, but you break everything on the car, versus having a bunch of races that are somewhat mediocre, maybe not as good as you would like, but you're executing your plan and you've learned and you're getting better. That's, I think, maybe what a lot of backmarker teams really kind of rely on and look at.
Yeah, and you do that mainly because, in my view, you want to do the best that you can with the equipment you do have. And plus, there's always the hope that maybe you will have the breakthrough financially for whatever reason. and then you will have the resources to actually compete near the top. And if you carry that mindset of just executing what you want to do on a certain weekend and be committed to getting better every weekend, you carry that to a top team, you're going to do really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that shows that you have really great management skills all the way around: time, budget, your on-track management. Yeah, if you can show that, and if you have aspirations to move up to a bigger team, when they see that and you've been able to manage those factors, you're not just a one and done, but you've been able to keep that going. That really, the big guys look at that like, wow, he knows how to work with such a small budget and such a small team. What can he do with a big team and an almost unlimited budget or something? And yeah, that's definitely, I think that's a very positive thing from being a backmarker and something that they all look at.
Yeah, that's what prepared me so well to lead my last team at Hilltop after Christian graduated, was just having that knowledge just from being a backmarker and having to struggle and grind and just not aim for a result necessarily, but just get better every week and pay attention to all the little details.
Yeah.
And it really set me up for success when I did have the resources to compete up front.
Yeah. It really starts to bring it full circle. And then, as a backmarker, once you finally break through, once you start to break through the mid pack, it's pretty easy. I would say once getting to the mid pack is a lot easier, I think, than getting to the at least from my experience. Once you get to the mid pack, you've really got to do some grinding to get to the front. But once you start to get through the field and you do get to the front, once you do get the package together, the finances, it is so much easier when you get there because you have been there, you have done that, you are a veteran of this, and it really starts to come together. At one point in my career, when I finally started to have everything come together, I remember all the struggles we'd had so early on, and then all of a sudden we'd worked, we gotten kind of into the mid pack, and then seemed like from one season to the next, we went from fighting in the mid pack, like really grinding it, to being the front runner, being the contender, the guy to beat. And it was like, oh my gosh, it is nice to be up here. And it kind of felt, get up there. And once you have that package proven, it's like, okay, this is a lot easier than what it used to be, but I'm prepared for it, I guess, mentally, physically, financially, hopefully, equipment wise. And it is a little harder to sustain that because you got to figure out how you're winning, how you're doing so well, and you got to duplicate it. And you have to keep moving forward. But
you can never get complacent when you get in that position.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And it's one of the, you just have to keep looking at, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is where I need to get better. And that's just been a big part of it. And you learn so much of that with being a backmarker versus coming in with an unlimited budget and just being at the front right away. Because then when it comes crunch time, I feel like a lot of those guys have trouble with their cars, or they have to go to somebody who knows what they're doing to tune their car or to work on their car, when they just come in and throw a bucket of money at it, versus when you're literally taking the car apart and cleaning each and every part on it to make sure everything's going to perform for, unlimited amount of time. So yeah, it definitely, that's something that being a backmarker absolutely prepares you for, is that success, I think, when you get there and maintaining it and always looking versus starting out at the front. And then you get into the odd case financially. We were talking about start and park rides and NASCAR. And that's a really interesting business model. I mean, Andrew, you can probably talk about that more than I can.
Yeah, I guess a little bit. I mean, I think the main point of start and parking really is just to make sure you have a car for the next week, because you guys are quite familiar with how NASCAR is and just how brutal it can be on your equipment, just because it's a contact sport.
Yeah.
And being in the back, I've heard, is really, really brutal.
They say if you're back with the squirrels, you're gonna get your nuts cracked.
Amen.
That's the other phrase. It's one of the many phrases in many Camber podcasts. First we said hope springs eternal. Now it's if you're back with the squirrels, you're going to get your nuts cracked. And I would also add to that my famous phrase: you can't roller skate in a buffalo herd.
Can't roller skate in buffalo herd.
Mr. Roger Miller there. But yeah, I guess that would be the extreme case of maintaining your equipment and executing a plan week to week to keep your team going as a starting park.
Just
Because
earn that last place prize money.
yeah, if you qualify for in NASCAR, if you don't know, listeners out there, as long as you qualify for the race, I believe it's still there is last place prize money.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And for some small teams with small budgets, that's a lot of money. And the risk versus reward of finishing mid-pack or a little bit higher up the order is very low reward unless you get to the front of the grid, and that's or front of the pack. That's a lot of risk to get that money. So that's the business model behind starting parks. It's the real extreme taking care of your equipment to keep the business going, to hopefully build on that for the future.
Yeah.
Hopefully. There have been teams that have remained starting parks for their entirety of the time in NASCAR. So, and we get that some at the 500, what we call field fillers. I don't necessarily want to name names, but there have been some cars that have made it in the past that are there strictly to get that, back of the pack prize money from the 500, because that money will pay them more than what the sponsor pays them, more than what them running the full season would, at least at one point in time. So there have been cars that will pull out with handling issues, things like that. And this was back when there was actually a lot of bumping. Nowadays, like this year, we only had 33 cars come out for it, so everyone was going to make it. And I don't think the last place purse was that much, but definitely it pays more to do that versus full season. So, but yeah, looking at it from the financial standpoint, that's where you are, and it's a tough business because you're constantly pouring money into it. We talked about this. What's the best way to make a small fortune in racing?
Start with a big one.
Yep. But that's kind of rounding it up for the week on the topic of backmarkers. I hope this has been a good topic for everyone out there. I know I've had a lot of fun with this, and we are working on some more content coming up. Andrew, it has been absolutely awesome to have you on the show this week. I hope to get you back on here for future episodes. So next episode is going to be a real hot button issue, especially nowadays in this time, but we felt that it kind of needed to be addressed from a positive standpoint. I'm going to put it as a positive standpoint in all this, and a positive viewpoint for the most part, but diversity in motorsport. And this includes all diversity in motorsports. So maybe we can get Andrew back on the show here for that one. Chris is going to be great for that. We're trying to get some more guests lined up to come in for that one, at least one more. And we can have maybe a little bit longer episode, but a really good episode on that. And hopefully address some issues there and talk some fun stories with that. Because if we can get some of the people in here we want to get in here as well, we have some cool stories with them. But Andrew, thank you for coming on this week.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really fun. Hopefully we get to do it again soon.
Yeah, maybe we'll have you as a regular on the podcast soon.
Hey.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Chris, any closing remarks from you this week?
Just gotta say that anytime that if you're a racer and someone calls you an amateur, or you think that running in an amateur division is a knock against you, just remember where that word comes from. Like I said earlier, you do it because you love it. And if that's something people can't seem to respect, well, then they're just missing out.
Absolutely. We're here because we love this. We're obviously very new into the podcast world, and obviously our viewer count shows that. But we're here because we absolutely love motorsport. And at times that love may waver a little bit at times, but it is absolutely one of the number one things in our lives, even if we're running at the back, and nobody can tell you differently. Chris said, don't ever take that. So I want to say thank you to the people who have been listening. So, as I say every week, keep it on all four and keep on keeping on. And cue the cart noises. This has been the Camber Karting Podcast. Thanks, guys. See you later.